The second question I posed to them was, what are the challenges facing both the practice and the understanding of leadership, and what advice would they give to academics, practitioners, and those who are trying to combine both, the pracademics? And they have given that some thought, I hope, and we'll find out.
Now, in the first place, I don't give advice. I want people to come up with themselves, because I don't like to do that kind of thing. I train a lot of coaches, and what they have to do is to get it out of the people, what they really want. I mean, you want to project your own fantasies on them. But if I'm going to give advice, to be paradoxical, now basically it's the element of own your own life. What I'm trying to say is that when you're 95 years old, and all your loved ones are on your deathbed, and so you shouldn't say I should have done it. What I'm trying to say, follow your convictions, follow your passion. That's, I think, very important. The other thing has to do with, I very often say, the challenge of life is to die young as late as possible. And what I mean by that is really keep on learning, because I see too many people old before, keep on learning, keep on being curious. I mean, that's the way, look at Warren Bennis, for example, who has kept on going, kept on doing new things. Look at this lady beside me. This is a formidable lady. Don't underestimate her. So, I mean, she has been trying to renew herself all the time, and that's important. So those are my two. If I give advice, I don't like to give advice because I want to listen to them.
Francis?
I would not give advice, but I'd love to have a little fireside chat,
all right,
a little dialogue with them. First, we have to know ourselves. What do we value? And we know who we are. And that's hard. That's not easy to do. But when we say, this is who I am, and these are my values, and we listen very carefully to that, whatever we want to call it, whatever the spirit within, there's something inside that if we listen, tells us where to go, what we should be doing. It also says, be true to yourself. So if we say, these are my 5 values, then we live by those values. And no matter how successful we are in any of these 3 areas, when we have to do something that violates the principles we live by, we go out that door. That's very tough to do. But first of all, you have to be true to yourself if you're going to be faithful to and true to whatever that institution is. And then your own values and the values of the institution have to be congruent. And so we're very careful about what are the values of that corporation, that university, that organization, and then watch very carefully the leaders. Are the values on a plaque, on a wall, and that's the only place they are? But if the leaders of that organization, institution, are the walking values, they live the values, and people watch us. And when they read the values, and when our behavior is consistent with the values, the most amazing thing happens within the organization. They think, they're serious. They really mean this. It unleashes energy in the most amazing way. So I would say, if I were giving advice, and I'm like my friend, I don't give advice, but love to talk to you. First of all,
exactly,
we know ourselves. We know what we value. And then we express ourselves in our work, whatever that job is. And I learned this from Warren Bennis. Along the way, we express ourselves in our work, and along the way, we become a leader. So it all begins with principles, with values, with ethics, and then having the courage to say no. Because we can't be slightly unethical, or, well, I'll do something that I don't want to do today, but I'll be honest tomorrow. There isn't such a thing. And when we see people fail highly visible positions and organizations, companies, it breaks your heart, because at some point someone could have said, no, we don't do that in this company, this organization. So it all begins with ethics, values. We know who we are, what we're called to do, and we follow it.
And that reminds me of your summation that leadership is a way of being rather than
A matter of how to be, not how to do.
To do.
Yes.
And it seems to me that there is remarkable consistency between the two. I didn't hear you talk about position. I didn't hear you talk about authority. I heard you start with the concept of leadership in terms of personal development, convictions, awareness, self-awareness.
No, I mean, basically, it is not a very new concept. The Temple of Apollo in ancient Delphi, what was written above the Temple of Apollo? Know thyself. It's very old. And my experience in leadership development, and I've been doing it too long, my CEO recycling seminar, as I call it, is basically it's self-awareness. I mean, to really have it, if you know who you are, I mean, you don't project other things on other people, so you can be much more authentic. And also I want to make them aware that I had one executive some time ago said, every time I walk into the building, I have to be aware of the fact that with doing very little, I can make 30,000 people extremely unhappy. It's an enormous responsibility. And also what breaks my heart is very often when I see a person who is a leader of an organization, but of a country. We have one shot at it and really basically destroy it. I mean, Mugabe, at the moment, I think, of course, is a prime example of a person who came in, very heroically, and then basically the pathology of leadership took over. And you have example after example also in business. And that really, I mean, I used to be, as you know, the pathologist of organizations. I've been more optimistic, look at the other side more. But still, I mean, it's a scary thing, because the combination of position and disposition, before you know it, you are Hitler in the bunker. And you have no sense of reality. And the reason we talk about circles is that you want your information, what I also call a healthy disrespect for your boss. You should have a culture where you have a healthy disrespect, you can have give and take. And so this followership and leadership, everybody's a follower and a leader in a way. Yeah. So maybe one should try to find some other words, but it wouldn't be good for ILA. That's.
Well, many leaders have positions in temples where over the entrance it says, "What was your last quarter earning?" And so the question that comes to my mind is, how do you earn so much money giving people advice about knowing themselves and their self-conviction? There's no black bag that you pull a trick out for them, but you give them the hard advice of...
I'm a fool. I'm the fool, the jester, the last person standing sometimes. I think you do the same thing at times. I mean, it's a tricky thing, but one thing, of course, is important. I would say humor. That's the glue to get them to see the idiocy of what they're doing. But not always easy, because jesters usually after a while get beheaded. So it happens, yeah.
Francis?
Also, I think one of the things, the great gifts that Jim Collins has given us is the whole concept of the level 5 leader in all three sectors. Level 5 leader has personal humility. And it's fascinating in all three sectors when we're with leaders. How many times do they say, I, and me, and mine? If you start making little check marks, you get to a certain point where you realize they don't know it. They're already the leader of the past. They have failed. But the marvelous acceptance remarks by A.G. Lafley, there was nothing about him, all about the people, all about the customer is the boss, and no hierarchy. Now, if he had stood up and said, well, I'm really I'm really not one of the two greatest leaders and corporate leaders, but I'm very good. You know, we say good mentally, we're saying you're already on the way out. But the leaders in all three sectors who have personal humility with this passionate devotion, passionate commitment to the purpose, to the people, that's the leader of the future.
And it seems to me that's the second dimension that you've added then in terms of your fireside chat, and that is not only the personal development, but as part of that personal development to recognize the worth of others, to relate to others well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have 13 years I've worked with the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, 4 Chiefs of Staff, 4 years with General Shinseki, one of the most inspiring 4 years of my life. I was able to introduce him to a group, and he stood there, Chief of Staff, United States Army. He did not say, I am the Chief of Staff of the greatest army in the world, and let me tell you about big guns and big tanks. No, he said very quietly, I am a soldier. And may I tell you about the soldiers of the United States Army, the young men and women. He went on talking about our soldiers and several times called them our youngsters. When he finished, not one thing about himself, but everything about the principled, ethical leader who doesn't see numbers. Every one of those young soldiers had a name and a face. So that's just an example.
Thank you.